Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Danny Lichtenfeld, director of the Brattleboro Museum. So pleased to be here with you this evening and really excited about tonight's event. We're going to be hearing from photographer and journalist Erik Hoffner, whose work is on view at the museum in the exhibit Ice Visions. The pictures in that exhibit, Erik's photographs of frozen over ice fishing holes, have absolutely captivated and transfixed visitors to the museum and those who have been checking out the work online. It's a brilliant project that Erik has undertaken for, I think, 20 plus years now. And I hope he's going to continue it long into the future. Erik's exhibit is one part of a deep dive we're doing this winter into ice fishing. In the gallery adjacent to Erik's, we have another photography exhibit on view. It's called Ice Shanties, Fishing, People, and Culture. And this weekend, we're opening a sort of temporary outdoor exhibit at Retreat Farm in Brattleboro called Artful Ice Shanties. Next Tuesday, we'll be back here on Zoom hosting a panel discussion with a great group of folks involved in ice fishing in Vermont and New Hampshire. It's not exactly our standard fare as a contemporary art museum, but it's really been wonderful. We've been learning so much and connecting with all sorts of people we hadn't met before. And that includes Erik. So in just a moment, I'm going to leave the screen and bring Erik Hoffner on from his home in Western Mass. He's going to talk tonight about visual storytelling, and then we'll do a Q&A afterwards. So please feel free to stick around for that. If there are questions or comments that occurred to you during Erik's talk, and you're here via Zoom, please use the Q&A button on your screen to type them in, and then we'll get to those after the talk when we're doing the Q&A. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can type in comments there too, and we'll keep an eye on those. The other way you can participate in the Q&A is to wait until it's actually underway after the talk, and then you can use the raise hand button on your screen, and we'll get a signal to unmute you, and then you can ask your question yourself rather than typing it in. Okay, with all that housekeeping out of the way, it's my pleasure to introduce Erik Hoffner. Erik is an editor for the global environmental media outlet mongabay.com. He's a member of the Society of Environmental Journalists, and his writings and photojournalism projects have appeared in The Guardian, The Washington Post, Yale Environment 360, National Geographic News Watch, and others. Erik has exhibited in galleries and now museums in the Northeast as well as in New Mexico. And in 2019, his work was the subject of a 2-decade retrospective at the Linden Street Gallery in Boylston, Mass. Erik is also a longtime exhibiting member of the Vermont Center for Photography right here in Brattleboro. So Erik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks to you for hosting this discussion, but also the whole project with Federico and I. It's been fun to engage the ice fishing community in this context and to bring people together around art and conversation about how we live and work in our woods and waters around here. Also, kudos to the museum staff, so professional, so easy to work with, and clever and savvy. So it's been a real pleasure for me, and looking forward to coming up and seeing the exhibit again quite soon myself. I guess I'll just start. I'm going to show some images and resources and things like that just to help people visualize this idea of storytelling through words and with the images. So I'm going to just get that. I'm going to share my screen and then we'll go from there. All right. All right. So let me know if you can not see that, but yeah. So part of what inspires me to do what I do is bringing words and images together. And this current project is something I've been working with and moving parts of it around for 20 some odd years. I made the first images for this series in 1999 when I was still shooting in total black and white on film. And one of the things that was interesting was seeing these ice fishing holes and how they refroze overnight while I was out ice skating, and noticing that they made these incredible designs that really kind of bedazzled and became something of their own. So I just started shooting them totally in black and white and left the color film inside. And yeah, I've been trying to add to it every year that we get good ice here in the region. You know, as sometimes it just snows too much right from the beginning or whatever. But what I most try to do is make images on black clear ice, like you see there on the screen. And going and seeing these things in the morning after they've been refreezing all night has been kind of an exercise in wonder, at what what the planet is able to do with these simple elements. And these formations seem to become the eyeballs of the lake, looking as they do straight up at the starry sky. But I really enjoy telling stories of people and planet in ways like this that make you think when you look at them. So to be compared to Snowflake Bentley and to Edward Bertinsky and some other icons in this sort of field has been pretty special. So I really to again thank the museum for giving me this platform so that so many more people could see it. And this is one of my favorite sayings in this whole realm of making images. It's not about what you see, but can you make other people see what you see? And it's always a great challenge. And I think with composition and with practice, we can all be visual storytellers of a really high, intense, and effective way. So these are some of the things we'll go over tonight, basically. And like Danny said, well, I would love to hear your questions and thoughts after I share some of my thoughts, and please just save those up for then. And so a story can be seen as well as told, and I think that's pretty clear. I think that's because we're a visual species. One of our main senses as a species is vision, and you put a story together and put images around it, those images are so much more likely to bring people in. And my work as a journalist, where we're doing art selection on articles all the time, and it's always this challenge to figure out how to bring people into the story, and images is always number one, really, for me. The headline also important, but it's critical. And visual storytelling brings people into other people's lives, into other events in such an important way. So it's really fun to talk about. For me, I got into this because I'm a photographer first of all, but mostly I'm a self-trained enthusiast that comes from a long line of photographers in my family. But I was lucky to start working at a print magazine of People and Planet in the late 90s, and I got to know a lot of people, including the photo editors, who were really fantastic. So I just ceaselessly pick their brains about, what makes a great photo essay, and why did we choose to publish this versus that. And man, I learned a lot. What was also lucky for me in this kind of discipline is being a white guy. It's a field, photojournalism, but also documentary photography is very dominated by men over the generations it's been around. But gladly, that's changing quite a bit, and especially on the documentary side, it's been fantastic to see all these new faces coming through. But I would have to put my initial first main influences with folks like the Smiths, who published this incredible book in the early 70s, which raised awareness of mercury poisoning in the oceans. It's just something I found in the library as a kid, and I was curious about it as I did a lot of fishing, and I was drawn to the images, and wow, this book helped raise awareness about this Minamata disease that came out of this town in Japan where all this mercury was poured in the ocean, and the birth deformities that happened to people, and how they sought justice and won justice, and the book was part of that. So it really showed me the power of visual storytelling right as a child. And then a little later on, I became acquainted with Salgado, who is just an icon, and this book in particular really blew my mind, and super influential. But these days, where I'm finding a lot of enjoyment and excitement and inspiration is with new generations of documentary photographers, and gladly a lot of them are younger, and they're women, and they're from all different kinds of countries, because the tools for doing this sort of work are much more available now, and the barriers to doing the work are much better. Are much better, or are much lower. But one place that I find a lot of really great inspiration is this website here, and I hope you'll go check it out. They're based out close to Boston, and also I wanted to share. These are just a couple resources that I wanted to share early in case anyone needs to drop off. But this is a great place to poke around, because they do classes as well, and they have a magazine. This is a fairly new book that, if you're interested in documentary photography and digging into a deeper practice, definitely pick this one up, or find it in a library through the loan system or whatever. It's a really fantastic book, and Michelle knows so much more than I do about this topic. But from inspirations like them up through today, like Amy Vitale is another one. Evgenia Arbugaeva is fantastic. These two women, fearless and fantastic. I hope you look those up as well. A former colleague of mine, Jason Houston, is an award-winning documentary photographer. And speaking with him when I worked at that magazine really inspired me to do this, because he would just share how simple it is, how the tools are not hard. And so I got started doing ice visions. I was shooting these fishing holes while I was out ice skating, and then I got more interested in gathering bigger and broader stories, so I started freelancing for outlets ranging from Grist to The Guardian to National Geographic, and publishing in these places was really exciting and incredible. And I started to get these assignments in other countries and such. And then 2008 happened, and then a lot lot of the opportunity really crashed with travel budgets slashed and magazines going out of business left and right. So I did, I had to recalibrate at that point, but I did get to travel to Poland and to Sweden. And, while I was trying to figure out the whole, market situation, this is a shot from Sweden where I followed these citizen scientists who were bird dogging old growth forests that were being logged by state forest companies, which was pretty bizarre in a way. Sweden, the greenest country in the world, they say. So this was a big story, and National Geographic picked it up, and it became a global story. But as with many things, I had arranged the investigation and the travel and the news aspect of it around the photos I wanted to make. It's like one of the first things I do is trying to figure out what are the images I want people to come away with, to understand what's going on. So I figured out I could join this brigade of citizen scientists in the old growth forests and make this photo essay. And then I bracketed the investigative reporting around it, because that's just how I could figure out to make it all work. But yeah, so the new challenge these days is not that particular economic recession, but the current one and the pandemic. And so as an editor at Manga Bay, which has a global reach, we publish in 10 languages daily by 5 international bureaus, and we have millions of readers. Image selection is just one of the biggest things that I deal with every day, helping writers that work for me get their findings out to a bigger audience. So it's been a really interesting challenge to bring my own background of making images into helping our writers create their own images, and also to find other images that work for what we do. So I got started in this because I wanted to travel, and I wanted to maybe become a photojournalist and do projects like this. And I got into writing through the side door, because it was to this day it's super hard to get a photo assignment. You got to be of a certain echelon to bring off photo assignments these days. So if you're a writer, or say that you're a writer, prove that you're a writer, you can get an assignment, and then you can be paid to make images, which is how the whole economy of it works, especially if you insist on being paid for your images, which we all should. And editors are more likely to hire a person like me if I tell them I can make high quality images that you don't have to spend time sourcing. And that's one of the things as an editor now myself, I realize if you can make an editor's job easy, then you will never be out of work. So, news and storytelling can be two different things, but when I really like to do the immersive documentary photography sort of style of making images, not just taking notes and asking good questions, and then bringing out the camera and making a few snaps or whatever, but really trying to put the reporting gear down and to take up the visual reporting gear. So the hows and the whys of doing documentary photography are many, and like I was saying, check out resources like I was mentioning to really dig into it. Try to find classes at the local college, things like this. But and I've just run through some of my 411 of how we go through subject selection and things like this, and and that's really a really big place to start is what story do you want to tell, and it should be something that you're passionate about, and possibly you're part of this community of people or of families, of landscapes. What is it that you want to say and tell people about? And also, is that story being told in any ways? Are you bringing a new thing to it by bringing like a photo essay about it to the world? So that is always a really big question, and I haven't been called to do what other people are doing, because a lot of times other people are doing what that is better than I am, and I want to tell different stories. So kind of the concept is super important, of course, with any of these things. But the number two big question is access, and it's a big question because through the many decades it's been around, since the photographic process has become more democratized, the field has really been male dominated, but also like Western point of view, and somewhat manipulative. I don't know, like the words that are paired with images for these marginalized communities, sometimes they've been victimized, whether the story is about poverty or hunger or disease or environmental justice. All these things are really tough, and you really have to respect your subjects, and you have to understand what they're going through. So research is super important. Learn about the issue if it's not part of your community, and then really work to make the subject of what you want to do comfortable with your approach. And that often means, and I've heard it said, like the really people who really go and try to photograph like the Roma or something in Europe. I mean, these people are persecuted everywhere, and to gain access and okay from these folks, you should probably go and meet them and hang out with them, and not bring cameras, and not start pointing cameras around too soon. You need to know who you're dealing with, and why the story is what it is, and it really help you in your later concept if you do your homework. So gear is a whole other kind of part of this, and I'm not a gearhead, and I tend to find cameras and lenses that really work for me and that I can rely on. As you can see here, I'm a Nikon guy. You can be a Canon girl, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of great Panasonics and Sonys out there too. Point is, get the gear that you think will work for you, and get to know it, and use it a lot. Use it as much as you can. Here you can see on the screen I've got basically a 3-lens setup. The one on the right here is a mini zoom, so it can go kind of wide angle and also zoom in on something, but it's only a 28 to 70 millimeter. It's still kind of a smaller lens, but that's the workhorse. That's, if I had to do anything, I would take a 28 to 70 mini zoom if that's the only lens I could bring. But I also love these two in the middle. One is a 60 millimeter micro, which is super nice for close work and for portraiture. And it's also really small. It makes people comfortable to see a small lens. And Next to it is a really wide angle lens, sort of like a fisheye, and that's a fantastic thing for, when you want to jam a lot of information into a scene, like a picnic or, people out on the boats, and you want to capture the riverbank as well. It's great to have options like that available. These two in the middle, they're fixed focal length, so there's no zooming. So with those, you gotta get as close to the subject as you want it to look good in the thing. And that's one of my main things is get close, get as close as you can to your subjects, and it'll feel more intimate just by virtue of doing that. So these sort of lenses can really help you kind of keep that kind of point of view. And point and shoot, like over here in the corner, this is a Sony RX100. It's a semi-pro point and shoot, and that's just something for your pocket, for the front of your gig bag. It's a great thing to have a backup. If your camera body, if you run out of battery, or if you have a malfunction, boy, having a point and shoot can be a lifesaver. And I buy all these things used, especially the camera bodies. You can get a camera body for nothing. People are constantly buying a new upgraded camera body and switching out. And what you do is spend your money on the lenses. That's what these things in the middle are, because you can just keep putting those lenses on new and better camera bodies. Also, your camera phone can work great. And just the one main thing that I always remember with camera phones is, don't hold them like this. That's how we tend to take pictures of this thing. But editors and curators and people like me, we want to see horizontal pictures. That same goes for an SLR. It's tempting to tip the perspective. Sometimes that's the best shot. However, in my experience, the vertically oriented pictures just get used and appreciated a lot less than the horizontal ones. It's just sort of the format our screens are built at, and how, kind of the way we arrange visuals. So the key really is to know your equipment. I don't care what kind of equipment you like, just use it, practice, get comfortable, using it in all different kinds of situations, and practice on your kids, on your partner, your family. Bring your camera to events, and use it as an assignment, and just try to make it a challenge to bring out the best pictures of the family picnic you possibly can. And I give you some chance to work with some techniques doing that. But beyond sort of the really informal thing, what I like to do is give myself my own assignments, personal assignments. And that's where the Ice Visions series at Brattleboro Museum came about. Just a challenge to continually find new things to put in the series, and meet new people that are part of a community that I'm interested in. Another one that I keep adding to over the years is called Hunter Gatherer. And I follow people who gather roots and herbs and hunt deer and roots and veggies and all this sort of stuff. So I really feel like that is great, because it keeps you shooting, it keeps you curious about how your gear is doing, and it just it keeps your trigger finger very ready. So one of the main things I always try to do with my settings is I deal with the exposure settings. I mostly shoot on aperture priority settings. I just choose what aperture I mostly want to shoot at, and then let the camera decide speed. But the main setting is the size of the image. And my advice is to shoot big. Always shoot big. The biggest files your camera can make. Because making images that are too small can really make you cry later. And I'll just give you an example. I know Paul Hawken, he writes me recently and he says, hey, this article you did at Manga Bay is fantastic. The writer that you sent into the jungle of Peru made an image I want to use in my new book. You know, and this guy is a best-selling author. Fantastic. Let me connect you with the freelancer who we hired. She gets back to me. I shot all those pictures at 72 DPI. They're super low res, and I was like, oh, why'd you do that? Okay, all right, maybe we can work with that. Well, I did it because I only had one memory card. So my advice is to invest in memory cards. Bring lots of them. They're big now. They're for cheap. And shoot raw if you can. And then, you know, later on you can move the raw images into, you know, a JPEG format if you need that for an editor or something like that. It's a little bit more, but it won't make you cry later. You know, just capturing all of the information is just so super critical. So yeah, so the exposure setting is the second thing, and I advise to, well, especially when you're going to be working in lower light, but even in general, I stop the camera down 1 or 2 stops every time, so that the exposure is a little richer and denser. The colors are a little more vibrant, and that sort of setting typically just helps the camera work better in like an indoor situations. Like if you don't want to use a flash, just stop the camera down. It's it helps you forget about that whole thing. And I never want to use a flash when I'm doing an assignment. It's just it's so distracting to me, because is the flash setting right? Is it charged up? Also, it's very jarring to the subject, so I don't like to do that. So I like to play with the exposure settings instead. So the medium is a whole other question, and obviously here we're looking at color digital, but sometimes the medium is something totally different. Like here's an example. I did a photo assignment in Poland, and the subject was heritage breeds of animals. These ancient breeds of animals who were bred by monks in the AD 1000 era and all this. They were adapted to Poland and the cold weather and all this, and they were dying out. And these antique breeds were dying out. So this NGO was bringing them back by finding them on game farms and breeding them and bringing them back to farms where they're well adapted to things like sustainable and organic agriculture. So my point was, I'll shoot some of this in color digital, but I really want to make these images in black and white on film. And I wanted to show the sort of antique and old school breeds on an analog kind of format. And I had a ball doing it. Flew into Warsaw, went to the first good camera shop I found, and I bought all their film. The guy couldn't believe it. But it worked great. And so I really encourage people to think about, what medium you want. You're not relegated just to shooting color digital. Another thing I like to do personally is I shoot images on toy cameras. These funky Diana cameras, Lomo cameras. They're all kind of distorted and have light leaks, and you can buy funny lenses for them. But I keep thinking there's some assignment or project that it would be fantastic to use that kind of camera for. it would, that would really fit the subject. Yeah, so focus obviously is one of your other main projects as a photographer. It's key, and sharp focus is great. We all love that. So you need a higher f setting for that, but if there's not enough light, or if you're working in a situation where you don't want to use a flash, just use a lower f setting. And what is fantastic about that also is that you get that shallow depth of field, which helps you really to show certain things in focus and other things in relief and in the background. So no, that's not it. I really like that, and because it helps you tell the story. Like, you can see the whole room I'm in right now, but if I want you to focus on the lamp, I can do that by using an f setting that works that way, and then de-accentuate, well, probably opposite, but it would you can de-accentuate certain things by choosing that f setting in a different way. But when in doubt, if I see a situation and there's it's a huge part of the story I need to tell, and I don't want to fiddle around, I'll just switch to auto, let the camera figure it out, because besides practicing a lot and knowing your gear and just being kind of native to you, like how to shoot a thing when you see it, auto can also be your friend in situations like that. So yeah, and some techniques that help you tell a story that is compelling include showing motion. And so practice panning. If you're covering sustainable agriculture in southern Vermont, you're going out into the fields of somebody at dawn. They're carrying baskets to harvest root veggies or whatever. Work on that. That's a fantastic thing of movement. If you can use your camera to pan along while you're walking, blur out the background, and just the gardener is in focus. Whenever you can bring motion into a scene, that really engages people a lot and really can help you tell that story real well. Yeah, and so also just like practicing walking and clicking. We have this concept of, I'm going to make a picture now, so I'm going to freeze, and everyone knows I'm freezing, so there's a picture coming. However, if you can be more facile and practiced, you can move with people, you can follow them, and you can just be clicking as you go. And couple perspective things that are really fantastic about that to work with and to try is to practice taking pictures with the camera way up over your head, like all the way up there, and just pointing the camera down and making pictures that way. And so that takes some practice. That's the sort of thing you want to bring to the family picnic, because otherwise you might end up with 16 images of just the very, half the tops of everyone's heads, or that kind of thing. Also, another great technique is to move along with people and have the camera like down at your feet while you're walking. I don't know if I can show you this, but like walking along and having the camera down by your feet with your thumb on the shutter, and just shoot while you're walking. Just aim it up at the people you're following, or the boats or whatever they are. So here's an example of one. This is a screenshot. I should have used a proper image, so it's a little blown out, but you can see I'm holding the camera way up over my head as this activist is looking at a pile of illegally sawn or cut down trees, and it gives a better perspective of what the scene actually looks like. And here's an example of me running along after this hunter, and I'm just holding the camera right down by my feet, and I'm shooting up, and and I've got an F setting here chosen on purpose to accentuate the foreground, just so you can really get into what this habitat looks like, where these birds are that he's hunting. And this image is an example also of a way to create motion in your visual storytelling that's effective. Don't always center people in the middle of the frame. Here you can see he's walking. That's really helpful. But also, if he wasn't even walking, if he was just standing to the side like this, it also gives the image a sense of motion because it seems like he's moving out of the frame. So that kind of composition is, I mean, these are just simple things, but when you do them and you practice them, you can find really interesting ways of telling the story that bring people immediately into the scene. And the people in the scene are, I mean, that's one of the other kind of important things is doing your homework, knowing who they are, making them easy with what you are doing, and trust that you want to tell their story or their community's struggle. And even so, they will, whenever you bring up a camera and point it at somebody, they instinctively, people kind of freeze up. Oh, I'm getting my picture taken now. Okay, how do I want to look? Do I look okay? So one of the things I like to do is just to kind of get going with somebody. I'll tell them, I'm checking my settings now. I'm bringing the camera up and I'm pointing it at them while we're talking. How was your night? Did you see this or that? And I'm literally shooting. I'm shooting for the assignment already. They already know I'm there to make pictures, but I haven't told them I've started yet. And usually if you eventually will say, okay, well, let's get some pictures of you or something, you'll see a change. And I find some of my best and most candid pictures are when people are more relaxed and they're just thinking about, oh yeah, that was interesting last night, and they maybe gaze off or something like this. I also really like to continue shooting even after, I'll say, okay, well, this is great. Thank you so much for your time. And what are you doing tonight? Um, you know, keep shooting, because they'll relax again, and you'll just get a different kind of picture. And it may, you may not like those pictures as much anyway. Maybe the ones that are more posed or whatever. Somebody, she wants to sit in her, special chair to get her picture taken. Well, those might come out better anyway. But gives you more options to edit from later when you make more images. But if she's sitting in the chair, her favorite chair, then I'll often ask her to look away. Look, can you look in that corner over there while you tell me what happened, that night or whatever. And those kind of pictures really, I mean, those, as soon as they stop looking at the camera again, it becomes more interesting in some ways. So it's enough, and that whole thing is one reason why I also shy away from big lenses, because big lenses really can frighten some people, but also it can, other people will say, wow, what a great lens, or what kind of camera is that? They'll get super interested in your gear when they're the subject. Your gear is not the subject. So just another reason for me to use smaller lenses that are less obtrusive, and just let people be at ease because it's their story. And so for that reason, that's another reason I like to bring a point and shoot, because the point and shoot is this tiny little thing. You just you just pull it out of your pocket and boom, you got a couple more pictures. Great. And nothing makes people more at ease than seeing a tiny little nothing camera. But these tiny point and shoots they're making now are really pretty fantastic. So I mean, I could do a whole. I feel like I could do a whole assignment just with my Sony. Yeah. So also one thing I recommend people toy around with doing when you're doing a documentary project is to record your subjects. Can you take an extra second and ask her while she's sitting in her chair, do you mind if I turn the voice recorder on my phone so I remember what we're talking about and remember the details about what you said about that night, because you know I need caption info. Um, you know, and sometimes I've used that audio later for video, which is also really helpful. So this is a nice thing to have, um, an extra thing for with audio files that are great. Um, Close-ups and details I find are really fantastic, because a lot of times what we'll end up seeing from a photo series is a whole series of you know a guy walking through the woods and the guy digging the roots and all this stuff. um, but what does the thing look like in a really fine detail? So I'm always suggesting to my reporters that I hire for Manga Bay or whoever, um, make shots like this, real tight focus. Um, Maybe use that kind of F setting that blurs out the background. Just give us hands, show me the seeds that you got or whatever. Those are really nice addition to any kind of scene that you're working with people. Um, so okay, so now you've got a pile of images. You've met these people several times and all this. What do you want to do with all this stuff? Um, the output is really it's a big part of what you should think about. Editorially, it's really enticing as an editor. I can tell you, when I get approached by somebody who says, "Hey, I really liked your story about X, and I have been making pictures of a version of X for a personal project for a couple of years, and I've got a whole thing, and it tells a different side of the story to the one you told." And when I hear that, I'm immediately more interested versus someone saying, "Oh, I really like the story you did about X, and will you hire me to do a story about X version 2?" Well, maybe, but there's more questions for me as someone who has to make a lot of decisions like that on a daily basis. So you can sometimes, video assets that you can get are great. Any of these SLRs nowadays, I mean, these things will create a high def video for you. So like I made a video of how my process for ice visions, and I posted it on YouTube, but also entered it in a film festival. Um, and I've got a whole other audience for my project that way. So that's always a great, um, other outlet for what you do. Um, Fine art stuff like exhibits and galleries and things like this are pretty great. Sometimes even sell stuff, but it's not selling work out of galleries it's a very tough business, and really those sort of exhibits are much more about telling the story to a wider audience and reaching more people with your work. So of course you have social media like Instagram, Twitter, the different platforms. These are great, and this is like one way you can immediately start telling a story. Like I have been spending time with the most amazing community in northern Maine who fish in a certain way, and start putting them up on social media, and that's great. You get some engagement. You get feedback. You learn about new new communities. People contact you, whatever. But also, it's great for someone like me as an editor. I am more likely to hire a person who not only makes interesting images, but shows me that he or she can, is a promoting that work and has it on social media, and it looks fantastic, and they're answering comments, and so there's a conversation going on. it tells a curator or an editor that you're going to be a good partner going forward on a project. Um, so talks like this, making a great big project out of your passion or your story you love to tell gives you an opportunity to do slideshows. These are fantastic public events, all kinds of community groups, libraries. They Yeah, you want to do a slideshow on X, that's fantastic. Our community is really interested in X. So that's a really nice thing. And nowadays, of course, thanks to COVID, we're getting super good at putting these sort of things together for a virtual audience and reaching all kinds of new people all over the world, really. So silver lining of our current predicament. But I and I don't care where the audience is. I want to reach them. So I do exhibits and of framed pictures in my own hometown post office. I don't care. Um, Coffee shops, all these sort of things. That's a little bit off the table right now, of course, with COVID, but it's really it's worth doing, especially if you feel like you can frame um, and exhibit yourself. Frame it easy in a couple of these other places like Light Impressions. These are, I mean, it can't be any cheaper, and the quality is really good as long as you're okay with assembling stuff and putting it together. I'll definitely build a website. It's not a thing that people tend to do anymore. Mostly, I hear people say, "Oh, yeah, check my Instagram." But like social media profiles are great and they're free, but they're not a curated thing where a person can come and learn about what you do and see it and all that. And things like Squarespace and Foursquare, all these other companies make it really cheap and easy. It's just a virtual business card that it's really handy to point to from your Instagram or Twitter feed. So I really suggest people use that um, piece of virtual real estate. A great place, speaking of virtual real estate, is to be seen is Social Documentary Network. Those folks I mentioned at the outset. You can pay a little bit to create a virtual exhibit there, and they draw from their virtual exhibits for the magazine, for the print magazine. They go through it and look at all the things, and they say, "Oh yeah, all right, Erik has a thing about Maine and fishermen," and they'll go back or whatever, and you can end up in the print magazine. So that's pretty fantastic. Um, Also, consider entering your work in contests, when you're comfortable with that kind of thing, because winning a contest or an award is, once you do it one time, you're now an award-winning photographer. So that opens a lot of doors, just being able to say that. And it doesn't have to be the Pulitzer, it doesn't have to be photo of the year. It can be something a lot more low key. And when you're in these sort of contests, it's also handy because every contest has a jury, and this jury is made up of photographers, curators, gallery owners. They see your work. Even if you don't win, they might pull you aside and say, "I really liked your stuff." Uh, so I have gotten work out of that before. I've also gotten work out of doing PR for myself. Just reading a local newspaper and seeing that this writer is really interested in local food, and you know nowadays people's email addresses or Twitter profiles are appended right to their reports. Just reach out to them. I mean, most of the time, the only mail that we get as editors and writers is like, "You got the story wrong." Um, but and somebody says, "Hey, I really liked what you did about article on topic X, and you know, I've got this project, and do you want me to tell you more about it? Do you want to come out with me when I make images next time at the farm?" Um, Again, you're making someone's job as a writer or editor pretty easy when they don't have to dream up all their own ideas. You just have to be okay with, most of the time them not responding, because, inboxes get full very fast. Yeah. So again, it's just about making people's jobs easy. One other thing you can consider doing is make a little book. I do that sometimes. I'll grab a whole bunch of pictures from a series I really like, make a little book with snapfish or shutterfly, all these different little online companies will make you a really cheap little bound book for like $8 a shot. And I keep them in my bag, and if I meet somebody and she tells me she's a curator for a gallery and I think she might like my work, I'll just hand one to her. It's like just an expensive business card, but that has gotten me work too. So I do suggest that. But really the most important thing with your output from your project, whatever it is to share what you've produced with the people that made it possible. The stories you told, the anecdotes you shared about their lives, their challenges, their hopes and dreams. It doesn't look good on us as a photo community if we go out and we harvest all these images and stories and do our thing with them, and then they never hear from us again. It's really important to follow up, show them what they, how it came about, hand them one of those little books. And keeping in touch has benefits as well. It really helps. Sometimes they'll say, oh wow, yeah, thanks for following up, and there's another new aspect of the story that maybe you're interested in, and so your work and your project can continue to grow. So going forward, through my hasty 411 from here, here's just an example social documentary. If you want to really get more serious about learning stuff, these are multi-week classes that go on through their program. This is one good looking one. This is also a good looking one. Very, of course, interesting to me as someone who tells environmental stories. And I think, see, this one started literally today. I asked the folks if their classes weren't full, if they would take new students, and I heard the answer was probably. So if you go to socialdocumentary.net and check it out, why not inquire? They're also doing a documentary portfolio review. If you've already got projects going, portfolio review is a great way to get feedback from people who are pros, people who are gatekeepers at galleries or institutions or publications you're interested in. So look into this. It's in April. And reminder to check this book out if you can get a copy of it. I think it's a year old, so you can probably get used copies too through places online. It's fantastic, and Michelle's she really knows her stuff, and much more helpful than what you can get from this 1 hour conversation today. But yeah, so I hope people can chime in now with questions, and come see the exhibit in Brattleboro if you're in the region. It's up through March 6th. You can see my project in concert with Federico Pardo, the National Geographic explorer and photographer. His project is super cool because it has a whole audio component. So you can walk around with your iPhone, any phone, and listen to the audio files that are tagged to the different photos. And you can hear people talk about, what they love most about ice fishing, or what makes them craziest about people they see on the ice, or is really good. So I absolutely recommend it. They're up through March 6th. So this is how you can be in touch with me as well, before I forget. My social media, and there's an email address on my contact page. So Danny, I hope we didn't get any questions.
You hope we didn't get any questions? Can you hear me?
You're muted. Nope. Oh. think my speakers went to sleep.
Can you hear me, Eric?
Yes.
Okay. Eric, thank you. This is great. God, really chock full of really awesome hands-on, practical, and also really incisive suggestions and tips. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you doing this. We do have some hands up. We have some questions. I have a couple questions and comments. Let me just first say thank you again. And I also just want to give a shout out to someone at the museum who deserves some of the credit for our having your work at the museum, much of the credit, and that's our longtime chief curator, Mara Williams, who introduced your work to the rest of us. And Mara's on here in the audience this evening, and so I want to say a special thank you to Mara.
Thank you, Mara.
Yeah. Why don't we dive in with a couple of questions from the audience, and I want to encourage others to get involved. Type your questions into the Q&A, or we can try the raise hand function, and we'll see if we can make that work and unmute you, and you can ask your question yourself. And why don't we start with Clay has his hand up. So Jessica, if you would unmute Clay.
Uh-oh.
No
jokes, Clay.
You know Clay.
Yes. He's one of the funniest people I know.
Should I not give Clay the floor?
No,
Turn the mic over to Clay.
Very smart and ask very good questions.
All right. So Clay, welcome.
Hey,
We can
thanks.
hear
You guys
you.
hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Eric, good to see you, by the way.
Likewise. I see
Yeah,
you're going to be
missed
part
you.
of a program next week, right?
I think
Yeah.
thanks to you. Yes, ice fishing culture program happening next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. I'm excited about it. Eric, I love ice fishing more than anything. It goes ice fishing, then my family, then my dogs. No, swap that. Ice fishing, dogs, family, and then down from there. I think ice fishing is amazing. I've been following your work with your frozen ice hole regrowth pictures for a few years. You didn't talk about them much tonight, but I think that if people haven't seen them, I would love it if you would talk a little bit about what inspired you to take pictures of refreezing ice holes. And does it mean anything to you, or is it just really pretty to look at? Like, why do you do it?
Oh, yeah.
That's a great question, Clay. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. They're wondrous and they're all different, like snowflakes. So you can fall down a well of kind of inspiration by looking at them, and standing in the gallery and listening to people talk about what they think they're seeing in these formations is fantastic. It's like I hear words like mitochondria or wormhole or whatever. So just the sense of wonder that comes with looking at this simple thing, but it's also I am really interested in because it's like it's a cataloging of a beautiful thing created by people in an unexpected way. I'm part of the fishing community. I don't ice fish, but I am very sensitive to what the community is about and who they are and the fact that ice fishermen actually are good stewards of the resource. Generally, fishermen, hunters, people who grow up working the fields, woods, and lakes understand what natural resources are, why it's important to conserve them. So I feel like they're a really important community, and they have this kind of relationship with the elements that the rest of us don't necessarily have, like, working literally with elements like ice, snow, and cold to fool a fish. And, and also one of the reasons I come back to this is it's not only is it an unexpected beauty and something that has kind of changed over time. The formations I've been able to find have changed somewhat over time as our winters have warmed. And like last winter, the holes were a little crazy because the winter was the warm snap we had was so warm, and they just didn't form the same way. So the unexpected part is really cool to me, and also kind of busting the stereotype of ice fishers as these people who hang around all day and get drunk and play the radio too loud with the football game. No, it's not like that. It's actually a lot more about respect, wonder, and pursuit, and community. And I see the community is fantastic. The families I see on the ice these days, children out there, getting really into fishing through the lens of ice fishing is fantastic. And we know that kids who grow up from having had those sort of experiences are going to be better equipped to care for the planet. So I really like that whole aspect of it as well. Like, it's more than beer cans and chicken wings on the ice. It's this is a real deal important community.
Clay, we've unmuted. We had you muted for a second. I didn't know if you wanted to respond or follow up.
No, I think that's a great answer. And it's what a shame, Eric, that you don't fish too, because I think you'd enjoy it. Once in a while, we'll have our ice holes freeze around our fishing lines, and I think that would be an interesting series of fish stuck under the ice under frozen fishing lines. But thanks,
Cool.
Eric. It's good to see you.
Really cool. Yeah, thanks, Clay.
Clay, thank you. Thanks for that question. Thanks for being here tonight. Mara has her hand up. Let's get Mara unmuted.
Now I can unmute.
There we go.
Good
Yeah.
to see you both in this weird time that we live in. It wasn't weird when we planned this show, Eric, but it has become increasingly so. Thank you for your talk and both the practical and artistic side of creating documentary photographs, and all of your sort of heartfelt understanding of ice fishing and its intersection with environmental consciousness. But I just want to say a word about these pieces as just pure visually poetic wonder. I love your word wonder, that you skated across these holes they had frozen over, and you were full of wonder at what was there, and your pictures capture that wonder. But I'm fascinated by not just the worlds they create, but this perfect circle that's augured by man, and how everything fills in these incredible symmetries by nature. And you're coming across them, but you frame them in a very interesting way because you don't print symmetrically. You usually have a horizontal plane with a circle somewhere in there, as opposed to square format photography is really big right now, very hot, very balanced, and it's that offset of where man has intervened with a circle, which is sort of the perfect shape. And how all the freeze lines come in again, and how black your blacks are, and how middle tones highlight certain blacks. But I'd just like to take a moment for everybody to understand that this particular body of work called Ice Visions just is a complete aesthetic moment in and of itself, and doesn't actually need all the rationale on either side of it. They are the most satisfying images to just sit and look at. They're mesmerizing. So thank you for creating them.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mara.
Thank you.
Thanks for connecting us, to all of us, to Eric's work. So Eric, Harvey, who I know is a photographer, chimed in earlier with like some technical stuff when you were talking about lenses and things like that. So jumping back to that, Harvey wrote in, sadly, you can't print. You were talking about the merits of taking pictures with your camera phone, even if, sometimes that works well. And Harvey wrote, sadly, you can't print large with iPhones. And by the way, what size prints do you go up to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a technical challenge, and it's harder to know what to do with a great image that's on your phone, but at least you have it, and then maybe you can do something with it eventually. I don't tend to print very large. I mostly when I'm outputting something, I mostly do full frame sort of things. So there's no cropping of the actual information in the image, and typically I'm working on 16 by 20 paper. Sometimes I'll work on 20 by 24 paper tops. I don't know. I just like the subjects that I like to work with are big enough in their own right that I don't feel like they need to be wall size. And hopefully that answers your question. I don't feel like images need to be huge to surprise us. It's what you do with the available info.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That said, I feel like some of these pictures, these Ice Visions pictures,
mm-hmm.
It could be incredibly cool to see them really large. And in particular, like this one maybe is one of the ones I'm thinking about where there's some detail in the center, these tiny little bubbles, and that, they just draw you in. And I feel like seeing them really huge could be
that would be
could
fun.
be really cool.
Yeah, and I could imagine projecting them onto like a wall, or a side building would be cool.
Sure.
Sure. When you get really big like that, you're going to lose some detail. Like if you look real closely at this, you'll see there's snowflakes on the ice, especially in the darker part. You find individual snowflakes, and maybe they look like stars and suns from distant galaxies or something. I don't know.
Right.
But
right. Eric, I have a question sort of following up on a point that Mara was making. I was introduced to you and your work first through this series here, Ice Visions. And so I had no way of, I had no reason to suspect that you spend a lot of time in documentary photography. Like this feels very much like a fine art photography project, and reads that way initially, just visually. I'm just curious, this is a question that comes up at our museum from time to time. Is documentary photography art? And, what documentary photography that makes sense to show in an art context and so on. I'm just curious if you spend any time thinking about any of those issues.
Well, certainly it's not seen as much in a gallery museum format, but I think these images that people are making, like Amy Vitale and Jason Houston and people like this, I've seen them in galleries, and they really do work well. They're phenomenal. But these are people at the top of their game, and so I think it requires a good match with subject and space and craft. But absolutely, I think they work, and I think it would be compelling. I'd love to see a really far-reaching or specific documentary photo project in Brattleboro sometime. That'd be really cool.
Thank you for that. Anne has just written into the chat, just by the way, talking about scaling up images. She says, check out Topaz Gigapixel AI to scale up images with no seeming loss of detail. It's pretty amazing. Definitely going to check that out. Anne's an incredible artist herself who works in a lot of her works in a digital realm. So we'll definitely check that out. Topaz Gigapixel AI. Erik, in your work for Manga Bay and maybe some of the other work you do as well, it sounds like you see just gazillions of images all the time. What makes an image grab you these days, or like, jump out or stand out?
Mm-hmm. Certainly, people doing something is always going to make me look, and it makes everyone else look. We find, one of our challenges with illustrating story well is to make sure there's a banner image at the top that makes people stop scrolling through their feed to say, what's that? Or what's Danny doing there? I don't know what that is. And then, they'll get more interested. And then, we can get, at least a few lines of text in their brain, and then they can decide if they want to read the story. So certainly people doing something is a major major topic for what we do in news. But we're also, being an environment and conservation website, animals of any kind, whether they're doing something or not, is going to be exciting. But yeah, I mean, I need to see something more in an image than just illustration. I don't care about images where there's a row of people holding signs. I want to see a different perspective. I want to see this person holding a sign, and clearly there's motion somehow. Like, it looks like this person is marching right past the lens or something. You know what I mean? It needs some sort of native motion. And even if the person isn't moving, even it's like that image I showed earlier of the guy sort of in the corner, you can tell that he walked the 20 feet to the right, and now he's about to walk out of the frame. So those are the kinds of images that really grab me. Color necessary sometimes it's black and white. Some of the really greatest photo essays we publish at Manga Bay and the print magazines I've been associated with are black and white, because they make you look. They make you look like, what is? I have no reference point for this. I don't. Stop signs are red, I know, but there's no color, so I'm gonna have to look a little more deeply, and figure out what I'm seeing here. So black and white does it for me almost every time.
Huh, cool. Mara has made a note here in the chat, I think in reference to the question of documentary photography in an art context, and she writes, Salgado shows at Yancey Richardson in New York City, a gallery in New York City. Thank you for that, Mara.
Yeah.
Erik, one more question, and then if there are any others that anybody wants to chime in, maybe get them in the queue right now, because we're going to wrap up shortly. I know you've been thinking about, this Ice Vision series kind of evolved in a way that has you thinking about climate change and its effect, and you do so much in this realm of nature and environmental photography and journalism. And I'm curious if you have thoughts about how we're doing in terms of telling the story of climate change in an effective way, or what it would take, or maybe you feel it's being done effectively in some ways, but it's such a big abstract concept in some ways, and I wonder if you have thoughts about how the telling of that story is either being done well or could be done well.
Yes, great question. It's improving, and where it's working best is where there's no pictures of polar bears. These sort of climate change images that we have become used to just are too much. They're too far away. They're too painful, heartbreaking. So a lot of the really important science communication to communities is happening through local journalism. where writers are localizing climate change for their readers. You know, from my hometown on the tip of Long Island, it's a very conservative paper out there, but you know, they print these pictures of, oh wow, you know, the ferry wasn't able to dock today because the tide was so high, because the docks weren't built to, you know, take, you know, boats at this level, and the ocean is now 14 centimeters higher than when they were built on average. So if it's high tide, you can't get off the island. So these are the sort of stories that really can bring it home to people. And a lot of times it's talking to farmers, you know, and what's interesting is obviously they know the elements super well. They know that the growing seasons are expanding, that the weather is a little less predictable, that the storms are a little stronger. The droughts have different, you know, the rains come at different times, whatever. They're also typically a very conservative set. So it's super interesting to talk to farmers about this thing that is, you know, bandied about as a liberal issue, something that only Greens care about, or Democrats. No, you know, ask a farmer. They won't be shy about telling you that the climate is changing. They may argue with you about, you know, whether it's our fault or not, but they won't deny it. And you know, so not every town, but most towns have farmers. So it's another way that journalists are localizing stories like that. And I think that's where, to get to your question, that's where a lot of the great science communication is happening, where you can make a concept that seems very out there available to somebody just by looking around them in their daily lives.
Well, thank you. I don't see any more hands up. I hope I'm not missing anyone here, but I think that's going to be a good place for us to wrap things up. Eric, thank you once again, not only for this talk tonight, but for giving the Brattleboro Museum the opportunity to share your work with the world. It's really been an honor for us and a joy. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Great opportunity for me, and just a pleasure to work with your whole team. You're a very top-notch outfit.
Thank you. The feeling's definitely been mutual. Before we sign off here tonight, I just want to let everyone know that a recording of this talk tonight will be available on our website within the next day or two. That's brattleboromuseum.org, in case you'd like to share that with anyone or if you missed part of it. And our website is also where you can find information about the other related events we have coming up in the next few weeks, including the Artful Ice Shanties, which open this Saturday at Retreat Farm in Brattleboro, and will be on display there for 2 weeks. And if you haven't seen Erik's exhibit in person, you still have a little bit of time to do so. And even if you have seen it in person, I encourage you to check out the virtual tour available on our website. It's not quite as great as being able to put your nose right up close to those beautiful prints, but it's the next best thing. And last thing I would like to mention is that if you enjoyed tonight's event and would like to make a donation to support this type of free programming, we, of course, would be very grateful for that. That's something you can also do at our website, brattleboromuseum.org. Every little bit really makes a big difference for us. So thank you for considering that. I think that will do it. Stay safe, everyone. Take good care of yourselves. Take good care of each other. And I hope to see you soon. Good night.